The dust cloud appeared on the horizon just after dawn, and Delilah Kane knew her past had finally caught up with her in Wood River, Idaho Territory. Somewhere she had hoped to disappear forever among the sagebrush and distant mountains that stretched endlessly in every direction around this rough mining settlement in the spring of 1882. She pressed one trembling hand against her swollen belly, now 6 months along, and felt the child kick as if sensing her fear, reminding her that she carried not just her own life, but another precious soul who deserved better than what fate seemed determined to deliver. She stood outside the boarding house where she had been staying for the past 3 weeks, watching that dust cloud grow larger, and her heart hammered against her ribs with such force she thought it might break free entirely. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine from the nearby mountains and the metallic tang of the creek that gave this town its name, but all she could smell was her own terror, acrid and overwhelming. "You look like you have seen a ghost, miss." The voice came from behind her, deep and steady, with a warmth that seemed to cut through her panic like sunlight through storm clouds. Delilah turned to find a tall man standing there, maybe 26 or 27 years old, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of river stones, gray-green and thoughtful. He wore dusty work clothes, leather chaps over denim pants, and a hat pushed back on his head revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends where it touched his collar. His hands rested easily on his belt, and everything about his posture suggested a man comfortable in his own skin, someone who knew his place in the world and felt no need to prove anything to anyone. "I need to leave," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I need to disappear, right now, before they arrive." The cowboy's expression shifted from casual friendliness to concern, his eyes sharpening as he looked past her toward that approaching dust cloud. "Who is coming? People who want to hurt me. People who think I owe them something I can never give." She wrapped both arms around her middle, protective and defensive all at once. "Please, if you know of anywhere I could go, anywhere at all, I need to vanish before they get here." He studied her for a long moment, taking in her condition, her simple calico dress that she had let out twice already to accommodate her growing form, her worn boots, and the single bag sitting by her feet that contained everything she owned in this world. Whatever he saw in her face must have convinced him of her desperation, because his jaw set in a way that suggested he had come to some kind of decision. "I am Samuel Owens," he said. "I run a cattle ranch about 8 miles north of here, up in the foothills where the grazing is good and the water runs year-round. It is remote, peaceful, and nobody comes around unless they have specific business with me, which is rare." "I could not impose," she started to say, but he held up one hand. "Disappear into my life instead," he said simply, his gray-green eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Stay forever. I have been looking for someone to share that ranch with, someone who needs what I can offer as much as I need what they might bring. You would be safe there, protected. That child of yours would have a home, a real home, with space to grow and clean air to breathe." Delilah stared at him, certain she had misheard or misunderstood, because men did not simply invite pregnant strangers to share their lives without expecting something terrible in return, at least not in her experience. "You do not even know me. You do not know what I have done, what I am running from, who might come looking." "I know you are scared," Samuel said. "I know you are carrying a baby who needs protecting. I know you are standing here asking for help instead of stealing a horse or doing something desperate that might get you killed. That tells me enough about your character." He glanced again at the dust cloud, which had resolved itself into 3 riders moving fast toward town. "But we need to decide now. My horse is tied around the corner, and she can carry two if we ride careful." Everything in Delilah screamed that this was too good to be true, that she would be trading one trap for another. But the alternative was facing Victor Marsh and his brothers, and that was no alternative at all. Victor, the man who had gotten her with child and then tried to sell her to a brothel owner in Denver to cover his gambling debts, would not let her go easily. He considered her property, same as he considered the child she carried, an inconvenience that could be disposed of or exploited depending on what profited him most. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" she asked, needing to understand even as precious seconds ticked away. Samuel's expression softened slightly. "My mother ran from a bad situation when she was about your age, pregnant with me, nowhere to go and no one to help. A ranch family took her in, gave her work and safety, asked nothing she was not willing to give freely. She worked as their housekeeper until I was born, then stayed on for years after, and they treated us both like family. She passed 2 years ago, but before she died, she made me promise I would always help someone the way we were helped, that I would remember what desperate kindness looked like and offer it when I could." He shrugged, but there was nothing casual about the emotion in his eyes. "Maybe this is me keeping that promise." The riders were close enough now that Delilah could hear the thunder of hooves on the hard-packed road leading into town. She grabbed her bag, made her choice in the space between one heartbeat and the next. "Take me away from here, please." Samuel swept up her bag as if it weighed nothing, took her elbow with his other hand, and guided her quickly around the corner of the boarding house where a sturdy bay mare stood tied to a post, already saddled as if fate had been preparing for exactly this moment. He secured Delilah's bag behind the saddle, then helped her mount with surprising gentleness, his hands steady and respectful as he assisted her awkward bulk up onto the horse. He swung up behind her with easy grace, settling her back against his chest in a way that felt protective rather than threatening, and gathered the reins with one hand while the other arm came around her waist to hold her secure. "Hold on," he said quietly near her ear. "We will take the back trails, stay off the main road. It will be rougher but safer." The mare responded instantly to his guidance, moving from standing to a smooth canter without jarring Delilah too badly. And within moments, they had left Wood River behind, heading north through sagebrush and juniper, following paths that only someone intimately familiar with this country would know existed. Delilah pressed one hand against her belly and the other against Samuel's forearm where it crossed her middle, anchoring herself to this improbable rescue, and tried not to think about what she was leaving behind or what dangers might follow. They rode for nearly 2 hours, climbing gradually into the foothills where the air grew thinner and cooler, where ponderosa pines replaced the scrubby vegetation of the valley floor, and where the views stretched for miles in every direction, making it impossible for anyone to approach unseen. The ranch, when it finally appeared, was more substantial than Delilah had expected. A well-built log house with a stone chimney, a barn that looked sturdy and weatherproof, several corrals containing horses and a few milk cows, and beyond that, she could see cattle grazing across rolling meadows that seemed to go on forever. Samuel brought the mare to a stop in front of the house and dismounted carefully, then reached up to help Delilah down. Her legs trembled when her feet touched solid ground, whether from the ride or the emotion or sheer exhaustion she could not say, and she might have fallen if Samuel had not kept his hands on her shoulders until she steadied. "Let me show you inside," he said. "You should rest." That was a hard ride for someone in your condition. The house interior was clean and simply furnished, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall of the main room, a kitchen area with a good iron stove, a solid table with 4 chairs, and windows that let in plenty of light. 2 doors led to what she assumed were bedrooms, and everything spoke of a man who took care of his possessions and his space. "The bedroom on the right is mine," Samuel said. "The one on the left was my mother's. It has a good bed, a wardrobe, a chest for your things. It is yours now, for as long as you need it. Forever, if that is what you want." Delilah turned to look at him, this stranger who had upended her entire existence in the span of a single morning. "I do not understand what you expect from me." Men do not offer help without strings, without wanting something in return. Samuel met her gaze steadily. "I expect you to heal whatever wounds brought you to Wood River running scared. I expect you to have that baby in safety and peace. I expect you to help around the ranch as you are able, nothing more than what feels right to you. Beyond that, I expect nothing. If someday you decide you want to leave, I will help you do that too. Make sure you have money and supplies and a destination that will be good for you and your child. But I hope you will stay, because this house has been too quiet since my mother died, and because I think maybe we could build something good here, something honest." She wanted to believe him. Every fiber of her being wanted to believe that safety could be this simple, that kindness could exist without conditions. But Victor had taught her to be suspicious of generosity. "The man I ran from will not stop looking. If he finds me here, he will bring trouble to your door." "Then I will handle that trouble when it comes," Samuel said simply. "I am not afraid of angry men. I have dealt with rustlers, claim jumpers, and every kind of hard case this territory can produce. What I will not do is turn away someone who needs help, especially not a woman carrying a child, and especially not when I made a promise to someone I loved that I would be better than the men who turned her away." Delilah felt something crack open inside her chest, some wall she had built to protect herself from disappointment, and before she could stop it, tears were streaming down her face. She had not cried when Victor had told her his plans for her. She had not cried when she stole money from his coat pocket and ran in the middle of the night. She had not cried through 3 weeks of living in that boarding house, taking in sewing to pay for her room, jumping at every shadow. But now, faced with unexpected kindness from a man who owed her nothing, she could not hold back the flood. Samuel did not try to touch her or offer empty comfort. He simply stood there, steady and patient, and let her cry until she had no more tears left, then handed her a clean handkerchief from his pocket. "You are safe now," he said quietly. "Whatever happens next, you are safe here. That is a promise I intend to keep." The days that followed took on a rhythm that Delilah had never experienced before, peaceful and purposeful in equal measure. Samuel woke before dawn each day to tend the livestock, check the water sources, ride out to make sure the cattle had not wandered into trouble during the night. Delilah woke later, fixed breakfast, cleaned the house, worked on mending clothes and linens, prepared meals, and slowly began to feel like maybe this place could become home. Samuel was courteous to a fault, never entering a room without announcing himself, never touching her without permission, never saying or doing anything that might make her uncomfortable. He told her stories over dinner about growing up on this land, about his mother's strength and determination, about the seasons and the animals, and the way the mountains changed color as summer progressed toward autumn. He asked nothing about her past, made no demands on her present, simply existed alongside her in a way that felt companionable rather than oppressive. 2 weeks after her arrival, she worked up the courage to tell him her story. They sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. And she spoke quietly about Victor Marsh, about how his charm had seemed genuine until she realized it was nothing but manipulation, about the gambling debts and the terrible proposition that had sent her running, about the fear that he would find her and drag her back or worse. Samuel listened without interruption, his profile still and thoughtful in the fading light, and when she finished, he was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "My father was a gambler too, left my mother with nothing but debts and me on the way. Some men are just built wrong inside, always taking, never giving, never understanding that other people are not tools for their use." He looked at her then, his gray-green eyes serious. "You did the right thing running. You did the brave thing. That child of yours is lucky to have a mother with your courage." "I do not feel brave," Delilah admitted. "I feel terrified most of the time." "Courage is not the absence of fear," Samuel said. "It is doing what needs to be done despite the fear. You have more of it than you realize." As her belly grew rounder and the child more active, Delilah found herself watching Samuel with new eyes. She noticed the way he handled the animals with firm gentleness, the way he fixed things that broke without complaint, the way he sometimes sang quietly to himself while working, old songs his mother had taught him. She noticed the strength in his shoulders and hands, but also the way those hands could be incredibly gentle when he helped her reach something on a high shelf or steadied her when she stumbled over uneven ground. She noticed the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention, something soft and wondering in his expression that made her heart beat faster. She had been so sure she would never trust a man again, never want one near her, but Samuel was different from anyone she had ever known. He was solid where Victor had been flashy, steady where Victor had been unpredictable, kind where Victor had been cruel. It was late July, with the heat of summer fully upon them and the meadows golden with dried grass, when Delilah realized she had fallen in love with Samuel Owens. The realization came suddenly, while she stood at the kitchen window watching him work with a young horse in the corral, patient and persistent, teaching the animal to accept saddle and bridle without breaking its spirit. She loved him, completely and irrevocably, and the knowledge terrified her almost as much as it filled her with hope. That evening, after supper, she gathered her courage and spoke before fear could silence her. "Samuel, I need to tell you something." He looked up from the harness he was mending, giving her his full attention in that way he had, as if nothing else in the world mattered except what she was about to say. "I am listening. I know I came here as someone you were helping, someone you offered safety to out of kindness and nothing more. I know I should probably keep my feelings to myself, but I cannot carry this alone anymore." She took a breath, pressed one hand against her belly where the child kicked and rolled. "I have fallen in love with you. I do not expect you to return those feelings. I know my situation is complicated, that I am carrying another man's child, that I bring more problems than solutions. But I needed you to know, because living here pretending I feel nothing has become impossible." Samuel set down the harness carefully, stood, and crossed the room to where she sat. He knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his, and his expression was open and honest, every emotion written clearly across his features. "Delilah Kane, I have been in love with you since about the third day you were here, when I came in from checking the north fence and found you singing to yourself while making bread, flour on your nose and your hands in the dough, looking more at home in this kitchen than anyone ever has, including my mother. I did not say anything because I did not want to pressure you, did not want you to think my help came with conditions. But if we are being honest now, then you should know that what I feel for you has nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with who you are, the strength I see in you, the kindness, the way you make this house feel alive again." Relief and joy flooded through Delilah so intensely she thought she might burst from it. "The baby," she started to say, but Samuel shook his head. "Will be our child if you let me be a father to him or her. I do not care about biology or blood. I care about raising that baby with love, giving them a good life, being there for every moment. If you will have me, if you will let me love both of you, then I promise you will never regret it. I will spend every day of my life making sure you both know you are wanted and cherished." Delilah leaned forward, framed his face with her hands, and kissed him with all the feeling she had been holding back for weeks. Samuel responded carefully, mindful of her condition, his hands gentle on her shoulders and then her back, holding her close but not too tightly, and when they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard and smiling. "Is that a yes?" Samuel asked, a hint of teasing in his voice that she had never heard before. "That is a yes to everything," Delilah said. "To staying forever, to building a life together, to letting you be this child's father in every way that matters, to loving you for as long as I live." They were married 3 days later by a traveling preacher who passed through the area, performing baptisms and weddings for the scattered ranch families. Samuel invited his nearest neighbors, the Crawford family who lived 5 miles east, and they stood witness as Samuel and Delilah exchanged vows in the meadow behind the house, with the mountains rising all around them, and the afternoon sun warm on their shoulders. Delilah wore a simple cream-colored dress that Mrs. Crawford had helped her alter to fit over her pregnant belly, and Samuel wore his best clothes, his dark hair combed back, and his eyes bright with happiness. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Samuel kissed her, gentle and reverent, Delilah felt something settle deep in her soul, a sense of rightness she had never experienced before. That night, they lay together in Samuel's bed, which was now their bed, talking quietly in the darkness about their hopes and dreams and plans. Samuel rested one hand on Delilah's belly, marveling when the baby kicked against his palm and told her about how he wanted to expand the ranch, maybe hire some help in a few years, build a legacy they could pass on to their children. "Children?" Delilah asked, amused. "You are already planning more than this one." "I want a house full of them if you are willing," Samuel admitted. "Growing up alone was hard. I always imagined having a big family someday, lots of kids running around, filling this place with noise and laughter. But only if that is what you want too. I will be happy with whatever we have as long as I have you." Delilah turned carefully onto her side so she could see his face in the moonlight coming through the window. "I want that too. A family, a real home, everything I thought I would never have." August brought intense heat, and the constant work of preparing for winter, cutting hay and stacking it in the barn, preserving vegetables from the garden, making sure all the buildings were sound before the snow came. Delilah worked alongside Samuel as much as her condition allowed, and he never complained when she needed to rest more frequently or could not do tasks that required bending or heavy lifting. The Crawford family became regular visitors, and Delilah found a friend in Margaret Crawford, a capable woman in her early 40s who had raised 6 children, and offered practical advice about childbirth and infant care without being overbearing. Margaret's eldest daughter, Rose, was 18 and newly married herself, expecting her first child in December, and the 2 young women bonded over their shared experiences. It was early September, with autumn beginning to touch the high country in gold and red, when Victor Marsh finally found them. Delilah was hanging laundry in the yard, moving slowly due to her size, now 8 months along, when she heard horses approaching and looked up to see 3 riders coming up the trail. Her blood went cold when she recognized Victor's distinctive black hat and the aggressive way he sat his horse. She dropped the shirt she had been hanging and called for Samuel, who emerged from the barn carrying a pitchfork, took one look at the approaching riders and immediately positioned himself between them and Delilah. By the time Victor and his brothers reached the yard, Samuel had set aside the pitchfork but rested one hand on the revolver at his hip, his posture relaxed but alert. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Samuel asked, his tone polite but lacking any warmth. Victor pulled his horse to a stop and looked past Samuel to where Delilah stood on the porch, one hand gripping the railing for support. "I am here for my woman and my property. She stole from me and ran, and I have come to collect what is mine." "I am not your woman," Delilah called out, her voice stronger than she felt. "I was never your property. The money I took was owed to me for services rendered, and you have no legal claim to me or this child." Victor's face darkened with anger. "You are coming back with me, Delilah. You owe me for the trouble you have caused, for the time I have spent tracking you down, for the embarrassment of having people know my woman ran off. Now come down here before I come up there and drag you down." Samuel shifted slightly, drawing Victor's attention back to him. "The lady is not going anywhere. She is my wife now, legally married, and this is our land. You are trespassing, and I am asking you politely to leave before this situation escalates into something nobody wants." "Your wife," Victor laughed, but there was nothing amused in the sound. "She is carrying my bastard child, and you married her anyway. What kind of fool are you?" "The kind who knows the difference between a good woman and a worthless man," Samuel said, his voice dropping into something dangerous. "The kind who keeps his promises. The kind who does not threaten pregnant women. Now you can turn around and ride out of here, or we can settle this another way, but either way you are not taking her. That is not negotiable." Victor's brothers shifted in their saddles, hands moving toward their weapons, and Delilah felt panic rise in her throat. "Samuel, do not," she called out. "Do not risk yourself for me. I will go with him if it means you stay safe." Samuel did not even glance back at her, keeping his eyes locked on Victor. "That is not your decision to make any more, Delilah. You are my wife, which means what threatens you threatens me, and I do not back down from threats. Now, Victor Marsh, you have 5 seconds to start riding, or I will assume you came here looking for trouble and defend my home accordingly." The tension stretched tight and dangerous across the yard. Victor's hand moved toward his gun, but before he could draw, a rifle shot cracked through the air, kicking up dust between Victor's horse and Samuel. Everyone froze as Thomas Crawford rode into the yard with his 2 eldest sons, all 3 armed, clearly having heard the confrontation from wherever they had been on Samuel's land. "Seems like you boys are lost," Thomas said conversationally, but his rifle remained pointed in Victor's general direction. "This is private land, and the owner has asked you to leave. In these parts, we take that kind of request seriously. We also take care of our neighbors. Now, Samuel is good people, and his wife is a fine woman, and neither of them needs trash like you cluttering up their property. So I suggest you turn those horses around and get moving before I forget my manners." Outnumbered and outgunned, Victor had no choice but to retreat, though the look he gave Delilah promised this was not over. "You will regret this," he called back as he turned his horse. "All of you will regret this." They watched until the 3 riders disappeared down the trail and were swallowed by the trees. Then Thomas finally lowered his rifle. "I saw them pass our place earlier, looking like they were up to no good. Figured I should ride over and make sure everything was all right. Good thing I brought backup." Samuel clasped Thomas's hand in gratitude. "I owe you. I could have handled it, but having you here prevented bloodshed. Thank you for looking out for us." "That is what neighbors do," Thomas said. "But you should know, men like that do not give up easy. He might come back, might bring more trouble. You need to be prepared for that." After the Crawfords left, promising to keep an eye out for any sign of Victor returning, Samuel took Delilah inside and held her while she shook with delayed fear and anger. "I am sorry," she whispered against his chest. "I am so sorry I brought this to your door." "Stop," Samuel said firmly, pulling back enough to look into her eyes. "This is not your fault. You did nothing wrong. He is a bully and a coward, and bullies always blame others for their own failures. But he is gone now, and we will be ready if he tries to come back. You and our child are safe. That is all that matters." 3 weeks later, on a cool September night with the first frost of autumn whitening the meadow grass, Delilah went into labor. Samuel rode hard for Margaret Crawford while Delilah paced the house, breathing through contractions, trying to remember everything Margaret had told her about what to expect. Margaret arrived with Rose in tow, both women carrying supplies and radiating calm competence. They took over the bedroom, sent Samuel to boil water and gather clean linens, and supported Delilah through the long hours of labor that followed. Samuel stayed close, holding Delilah's hand when she needed it, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, telling her she was doing wonderfully even when she cursed him for getting her into this situation in the first place. Dawn was breaking over the eastern mountains when their son finally entered the world, small and angry and absolutely perfect. Margaret cleaned him while Rose tended to Delilah, and then they placed the baby in his mother's arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, already quieting at the sound of her heartbeat. "He is beautiful," Delilah whispered, exhausted and elated all at once. "Samuel, look at him. He is perfect." Samuel sat carefully on the edge of the bed, looking down at the tiny face peering out from the blanket, and his expression was soft with wonder. "He is perfect," he agreed. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for weeks without settling on anything definite, but looking at her son, Delilah knew exactly what felt right. "Daniel," she said. "Daniel Thomas Owens, after the preacher who married us and the neighbor who helped protect us. What do you think?" "I think it is perfect," Samuel said. He reached out tentatively, and Delilah guided his hand to rest gently on the baby's tiny chest, feeling the flutter of that new heartbeat beneath their palms. "Welcome to the family, Daniel. We have been waiting for you." The first weeks with a newborn were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Daniel proved to have strong lungs and an insistent appetite, waking every few hours to nurse regardless of what time the clock showed. Samuel took over most of the ranch work while Delilah recovered, bringing her meals, changing Daniel when he could, sitting with her in the quiet hours before dawn while she fed their son, both of them too tired to talk but content in the shared intimacy of new parenthood. Margaret visited regularly, bringing food and checking on Delilah's recovery, offering encouragement and advice when the exhaustion felt overwhelming. Rose gave birth to her own son in December, and the two young mothers began trading visits back and forth, their boys sleeping in cradles while the women talked and worked on various projects, building a friendship that would last the rest of their lives. Winter came hard that year, with snow piling deep and temperatures dropping so low the creek froze solid. Samuel spent his days breaking ice in the water troughs, feeding the livestock, making sure everything and everyone stayed warm and safe. Delilah spent hers caring for Daniel, cooking, mending, keeping the house comfortable, and every evening they would sit by the fire together, passing the baby back and forth, marveling at how much he grew and changed each day. It was late January, during a brief thaw that melted the top layer of snow into slush, when Victor Marsh made his final appearance in their lives. Samuel had ridden down to check on the southern fence line, leaving Delilah alone with Daniel, who was napping in his cradle near the fire. She heard horses in the yard and looked out to see Victor dismounting alone, his face haggard and his clothes filthy, looking like a man who had spent weeks living rough. Delilah grabbed Samuel's rifle from over the door and stepped onto the porch, the weapon pointed steady at Victor's chest. "You are not welcome here. Leave now, or I will shoot you where you stand." Victor stopped, raising his hands, but his expression was defeated rather than threatening. "I am not here to cause trouble, Delilah. I am here to apologize and to let you go. You were right to run. Everything you thought about me was true, and worse than you knew. The people I owed money to came collecting, and I learned what it feels like to be property, to be something someone else thinks they own. I learned I did not much like it." He looked older somehow, weathered by more than just the harsh winter. "I just wanted to say I am sorry for what I tried to do to you, and that I am leaving this territory, heading to California to start over. You will not see me again. I wanted you to know that, so you could stop looking over your shoulder." Delilah kept the rifle trained on him, not trusting his words despite how sincere they sounded. "Why should I believe you? You threatened us. You tried to take me by force." "Because I have nothing left to fight for," Victor said simply. "No money, no prospects, no pride. Just regrets and the knowledge that I destroyed something good through my own stupidity and greed. That baby you had, is it healthy? Did everything go all right?" "My son is perfect," Delilah said coldly, "and he has a father who will teach him to be a good man, something you could never do." Victor flinched at that but nodded. "That is as it should be. I hope you are happy, Delilah. I hope you have everything you deserve." He turned back to his horse, paused with one hand on the saddle. "For what it is worth, Samuel Owens is a lucky man. I was too stupid to see what I had until it was gone. Do not make the mistakes I made. Hold on to what you have built here." He mounted and rode away without looking back, and Delilah stood on the porch until he disappeared from sight, the rifle growing heavy in her hands. When Samuel returned an hour later and she told him what had happened, he held her close and promised that if Victor ever did return, he would deal with it. But somehow they both knew that chapter of her life had finally closed. Spring returned with rushing snowmelt and meadows full of wildflowers, and Daniel learned to roll over, then sit up, then crawl with determined speed across the floor, chasing after the barn cats Samuel brought inside to play with him. Summer brought long days of ranch work and evenings spent watching the sunset while Daniel babbled and played in the grass, discovering bugs and grass blades with equal fascination. By Daniel's first birthday, Delilah was pregnant again, a fact that delighted Samuel and made her both nervous and excited. This pregnancy felt different, easier somehow, without the weight of fear and uncertainty that had clouded Daniel's gestation. She knew she was safe, loved and supported, and that made all the difference. Their daughter was born the following spring on a warm April morning that smelled of apple blossoms and fresh grass. Sarah Margaret Owens came into the world with less fuss than her brother, quick and efficient, already displaying the no-nonsense personality that would characterize her entire life. Samuel cried when he held her for the first time, overcome with gratitude for the family he had never been sure he would have. The years that followed were busy and full, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the joyful chaos of raising children. 2 more sons arrived, Michael and James, spaced 2 years apart, and then another daughter, Emma, who was born when Delilah was 32 and Samuel 36, and who they both agreed would be their last. Daniel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the horses and could gentle even the most stubborn colt. Sarah was fierce and independent, refusing to be limited by expectations about what girls should or should not do, riding as well as her brothers and better than most. Michael was the dreamer, always building things or drawing pictures of elaborate machines he wanted to invent. James was the comedian, keeping everyone laughing with his observations and antics. Emma was the baby, sweet-tempered and affectionate, wrapping everyone around her small finger. Samuel expanded the ranch over the years, buying adjoining land when it became available, hiring help during the busy seasons, building a reputation for quality livestock and honest dealing that brought buyers from as far as Boise. Delilah managed the household and the finances, kept the books, hosted neighbors for gatherings and celebrations, and somehow found time to be involved in every aspect of her children's lives. They were not wealthy by any measure, but they were comfortable, secure, and more importantly, happy in ways that money could never buy. The children grew up knowing they were loved unconditionally, that their home was a safe place, that their parents were partners who respected and cherished each other. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Delilah back to the meadow where they had been married and renewed their vows with all 5 children standing witness. 10 years ago, I asked you to disappear into my life, he said, holding both her hands in his gray-green eyes still as clear and honest as they had been that first morning in Wood River. You did that, but you also did so much more. You brought light and laughter and love into every corner of my existence. You gave me a family I treasure more than anything else in this world. You made this house a home and this life worth living. I love you more today than I did then, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Thank you for choosing to stay forever. Delilah smiled up at him through happy tears. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. You gave me safety when I had none, trust when I thought I would never trust again, love when I believed I was unlovable. You claimed a child that was not yours by blood and made him yours in every way that mattered. You gave me 4 more beautiful babies and a life beyond anything I ever dared to dream. I would choose you again and again, in every lifetime, in every circumstance. You are the best man I have ever known, and I love you with everything I am. They kissed while their children cheered and clapped, Daniel rolling his eyes in the way of 10-year-olds everywhere but smiling nonetheless. And as the sun set over the mountains, turning the sky gold and crimson, Delilah reflected on the long journey from that desperate morning in Wood River to this moment of perfect contentment. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as all lives must. They buried Thomas Crawford when he died of pneumonia at 65, mourned with Margaret who followed her husband 3 years later, celebrated when Rose's children started having children of their own. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated good years and worked through lean ones, always together, always united. Daniel married at 22, bringing home a schoolteacher named Alice who fit into the family as if she had always been there. They built a house on the northern section of the ranch and started their own family, giving Samuel and Delilah their first grandchildren, twin girls who looked exactly like their grandmother. Sarah shocked everyone by announcing at 18 that she was going to veterinary school back east, one of the first women accepted into the program. And while Samuel worried about her being so far away, Delilah encouraged her daughter to chase her dreams. Sarah returned 4 years later with a degree, a husband who adored her fierce independence, and plans to open a practice in Haley, the town that had grown up near Wood River. Michael became an engineer, moving to Boise to work on irrigation projects that would transform Idaho agriculture. James took over more and more of the ranch operations as Samuel's hair turned gray and his joints started protesting the hard physical labor. Emma married young at 19 to a banker's son from town, but remained close to the family, visiting often with her growing brood of children. On their 30th anniversary, Samuel and Delilah sat on the porch watching the sunset, much as they had done thousands of times before, but now their hair was silver and their hands weathered with age. 5 children, 14 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild so far, a legacy that spread like roots through the Idaho soil. "You ever regret it?" Samuel asked quietly. "Taking a chance on a stranger who offered you an improbable escape?" Delilah took his hand, laced her fingers through his, and smiled. "Not for one single second. You gave me everything, Samuel. A home, a family, a love I never believed existed. You kept every promise you ever made. How could I regret the best decision I ever made?" "I am the lucky one," Samuel insisted, as he had been insisting for 30 years. "I got to love you. That was always more than I deserved." "We were both lucky," Delilah said. "We found each other when we needed it most, and we built something beautiful together. That is all anyone can hope for in this life." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dropped below the horizon, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the house behind them, they could hear James and his wife getting their children ready for bed, the sounds of family life continuing in the home that had sheltered 3 generations now. The child Delilah had been carrying that desperate morning in Wood River, the baby she had been so terrified for, was now a man with children and grandchildren of his own, and he had never once been made to feel like anything other than Samuel's son in every way that mattered. The other 4 children had grown up secure in their parents' love, each finding their own path while knowing they always had a home to return to. Victor Marsh had been wrong about so many things, but especially about what made a man a father. Blood meant nothing compared to presence, to showing up every day, to loving without condition or reservation. Samuel had proven that truth over and over again for 30 years, and Daniel had grown up to be exactly the kind of man his real father could never have been: gentle and strong and deeply good. As they grew older, Samuel and Delilah gradually turned over the ranch operations to James and his family, though they remained in the main house, still the heart of the family even as their bodies slowed and aged. They spent their days reading, working in the garden, playing with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, watching the seasons turn and the family grow. Samuel was 65 when his heart finally gave out, quick and merciful while working in the barn on a spring morning that reminded Delilah painfully of the day Sarah had been born. Daniel and James found him and carried him into the house, but he was already gone, and Delilah held his cooling hand and thanked him through her tears for every moment, every kindness, every day of love he had given her. They buried him in the meadow where they had married and renewed their vows, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at, and the entire community turned out to honor a man who had lived his life with integrity and grace. Delilah stood between Daniel and Sarah, surrounded by all her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and though her heart was shattered, she knew she had been blessed beyond measure. She lived another 8 years, staying in the house that Samuel had built, surrounded by family, telling stories about their life together to anyone who would listen. She taught her granddaughters to be brave, her grandsons to be kind, and reminded everyone that the measure of a life was not in possessions or status, but in love given and received. On a cold January morning, with snow falling soft outside the window, Delilah Kane Owens closed her eyes for the last time, holding the hands of Daniel and Emma who sat on either side of her bed. Her last words were, "Tell your father I am coming home to him. Tell him I kept my promise. I stayed forever." They buried her next to Samuel in the meadow, and the entire family gathered once more to celebrate a woman who had come to Idaho Territory, running scared and pregnant, and who had built a legacy of love that would continue for generations. The ranch that Samuel and Delilah had built together remained in the family, passed down through James and eventually to his children, but it was always known as the place where two people had found each other against impossible odds and had chosen to build something beautiful together. Daniel, reflecting on his mother's life at her funeral, told his own children and grandchildren about the morning she had stood in Wood River begging to disappear, and about the cowboy who had looked at a desperate pregnant stranger and seen someone worth saving. "They taught us that family is not always about blood," he said. "It is about who shows up, who stays, who loves you through the hard times and celebrates with you during the good ones. My father was not the man whose blood I carry, but he was my father in every way that mattered, and I hope I have been half the man he was. My mother was the bravest woman I ever knew, and together they built something that will outlast all of us." The story of Samuel and Delilah became family legend, passed down through generations, a reminder that sometimes salvation comes in unexpected forms, that love can be found in the most unlikely circumstances, and that choosing to stay, to commit, to build a life together despite fear and uncertainty, is the bravest thing anyone can do. Years later, when the great-great-grandchildren asked about the two headstones in the meadow, about the dates and the simple inscriptions that read, "Forever," as promised, someone would always tell them the story. They would tell about a pregnant woman desperate to disappear and a cowboy who offered her something better. They would tell about 5 children, dozens of grandchildren, a ranch that prospered, and a love that never wavered through 38 years of marriage. They would tell about promises kept and kindness repaid, about a man who honored his mother's memory by helping someone the way she had once been helped, and about a woman brave enough to trust again after betrayal. They would tell about the family that grew from that single moment of desperate chance, about legacy built not on wealth or fame but on steadfast love and daily choosing each other. And they would end the story the same way every time, with the words Samuel had spoken that first morning: "Disappear into my life instead and stay forever." Because those words had changed everything, had created all of this, had built a family from fear and hope and impossible courage. The ranch still stands, updated and modernized but fundamentally the same, still occupied by descendants of that union between a desperate woman and a cowboy with a kind heart. The meadow where they married and are buried is protected land now, kept wild and beautiful, a reminder of where it all began. And sometimes, on spring mornings when the air smells of apple blossoms and fresh grass, when the mountains are purple in the distance and the creek runs clear and cold, you can almost feel them there still, Samuel and Delilah, young and in love and full of hope for the future they would build together, a future that exceeded anything either of them had dared to dream. Their story ended the way all the best love stories end, not with dramatic gestures or tragic separations, but with two people who chose each other every single day for as long as they lived, who built something lasting and good, who left the world better than they found it, and who loved each other with a constancy that time and trouble could not diminish. Forever, as promised. And they had kept that promise, both of them, until death and beyond, their love written into the land itself, into the family they created, into every generation that followed. That is the legacy of Samuel Owens and Delilah Kane, and it endures still, a testament to the power of choosing love over fear, of staying when running would be easier, of building something beautiful from broken beginnings.